I was invited to see the raw footage from the 7th of October massacres, and I've seen quite a lot in war zones I've covered, in the flesh as well as in sometimes being shown video of. I think what I saw yesterday is by some margin worse than anything I've seen before. And I've been in Nigerian villages when a suicide bomber goes into the church on a Sunday and blows everyone up. I've seen enough exit wounds from children's bodies. The footage of the 7th of October is a level of depravity that, yes, not even the Nazis did. Because the whole time they're massacring, throughout the whole thing, the Hamas fighters are in a state of utter elation.
Were the Nazis in a state of utter elation?
Yeah. Even when you read the accounts, both from the very, very few survivors and from those who witnessed it and those who partook in it, say that the soldiers had to actually be weirdly enough protected from their acts by getting incredibly drunk in the evenings, and trying to forget what they'd been made to do. The Hamas terrorists are utterly elated and delighted by what they're doing. I said this yesterday, but I really don't want to hear Allahu Akbar shouted again on my streets. It's a war cry. The Hamas terrorists are shouting Allahu Akbar all the way through, as they are using a shovel to decapitate a young man. With every blow of the shovel, they shout Allahu Akbar. When they go in to rape and murder all these young women in a room, they're shouting Allahu Akbar the whole time. When they find a young woman hiding under a table, pretending to be dead, and they realize she's alive, and they begin killing her, they're shouting Allahu Akbar all the time. And they're so elated. And they phone home. We've got the telephone calls now. They phone home. One disgusting young Hamas guy shouts from the phone of one of his victims, his father in Gaza, saying, "I have killed with my own hands 10 Jews. Your son has killed 10 Jews." And the mother is put on the phone and they're all shouting Allahu Akbar and they're so proud of him. When the world sees hundreds of thousands of Muslims marching against Israeli actions in the Gaza, they either agree with what Hamas did and like it, and an awful lot do. We have an awful lot of predominantly Muslims in Australia, Britain, Europe, America, who like what I've just described. They're on board with it, and they'd like to do it to the 7 to 8 million Israelis. So people either like that and want it, or they're totally ignorant of this, or they think that in the wake of that, the Israelis should just simply sit back, take it. And I don't think...
Or if they must respond, it should be proportional.
Which, as I always say, as I said in the week since the massacre, would mean that the Israelis should go in and, for instance, take a shovel and behead a young Palestinian man for every Israeli man. Do they really think? Does anyone really think that's what would happen? That would be proportional. Proportional would be a group of Israeli soldiers finding precisely the number of young women in the Gaza that the Palestinians found in the south of Israel, and raping precisely the same number of women, and then abducting them into Israel and spitting on their bodies and much more. I'm so fed up of the double standards on all of this. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been killed in the last 12 years by Bashar al-Assad and other Muslims in the civil war in Syria. There's no one on the streets of Sydney or Melbourne. There's no one on the streets of London. We have seen hundreds of thousands of people killed in the last decade in Yemen, Muslims being killed. There's no one on the streets of Melbourne. Nobody is standing outside the Sydney Opera House. Nobody's marching for the dead Muslims in Yemen. Their co-religionists, we're always told about, care so much about their co-religionists, don't give a damn about their co-religionists. They really don't. They have no love for the Palestinian peoples. None. If they had any, the Jordanians would have taken in the West Bank Palestinians, the Egyptians would have taken in the territory they used to run, the Gaza, and own the Gaza, and they would have taken in the Palestinians from the Gaza. Why have the Egyptians made sure that not one Palestinian is allowed to leave Gaza? Why do they make sure that their border wall is tough as anything? As we sit here, roughly the same population of the Gaza is being forcibly moved by the government of Pakistan. Almost 2 million Muslims are being moved by the Pakistani authorities into Afghanistan. Why does nobody notice this? Why is nobody saying this is an appalling war crime by the Pakistani government? So I think that if you are zooming in on Israel, lambasting Israel, and are basically not bothered with everything else in the world, you're not motivated by anything other than being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. Of course, and it just has to be said. I mean, I've said this so many times that I tire myself with it, but it's necessary to say anti-Semitism is a shapeshifter. It's a shape-shifting virus. It can come from anywhere. At times in the past, it was the case that people didn't like Jews because they were seen to be a different religion and strange and different, and so they were hated for their religion. Then after the wars of religion, you couldn't hate anyone for their religion, so people started to hate the Jews for their race. Then after the Holocaust, you couldn't hate people because of their race anymore, so people hated the Jews because of their nation. On and on.